Hello, listeners. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you liked today's story about Colton Clay. And if you enjoy this content, please give me a like and subscribe. Maybe leave a comment down in the comment section of something you'd like to see next or hear next. Again, thank you for watching.
The sirens didn't belong in Midland. They cut through the morning like something unnatural, high, desperate, continuous. Not the quick wail of an ambulance or the distant cry of a patrol car, but something sustained, urgent, wrong. Colton Clay paused mid-step on the graded platform of Rig 17, one hand resting on a grease-slick railing, the other holding a rag blackened with oil. Below him, the Permian Basin stretched endlessly, flat, sunburnt, and mechanical. Pump jacks nodded like iron giants, pipelines stitched the earth, and dust hung in the air like a permanent haze. This place had a rhythm. The sirens shattered it. He turned toward the horizon, squinting into the glare. "You hear that?" "Hard not to," Alvarez called up from below. Colton climbed down the ladder, boots ringing against metal. His muscles moved on instinct, years of repetition, but his attention stayed fixed on the sound. It wasn't fading. If anything, it was multiplying. By the time his boots hit dirt, the first helicopter screamed overhead. Low, fast, military. Colton watched it pass, then another followed, and another, all heading east. "That ain't right," someone muttered. Alvarez stepped closer, his face pale beneath the dust. "Phones are dead," he said. "Every single one. Dispatch isn't answering. Radio's picking up. Stuff." "What kind of stuff?" Alvarez hesitated. "People attacking each other. Whole town's going quiet. They said Houston." The words caught in his throat. Colton frowned. "What about Houston?" "They said it's gone." A silence settled over the crew. Not disbelief, something heavier, like instinct kicking in before logic could catch up. Then came the truck. It burst onto the access road in a storm of dust, horn blaring in one long, continuous scream. The white pickup fishtailed, slammed into a storage tank, and shuddered to a stop. Nobody moved. Colton stepped forward slowly. "Hey!" he shouted. "You okay?" The driver's door creaked open. The man who crawled out looked like he'd already died. Blood soaked his shirt, dark and heavy. His face was torn open along the cheek, exposing teeth through shredded flesh. His eyes, those were the worst part. Clouded, empty, like nothing was behind them anymore. "Jesus," Alvarez whispered. The man staggered forward. Then he ran. Fast, too fast. He slammed into a worker named Briggs, knocking him flat. Before anyone could react, his teeth sank into Briggs's throat. The sound, wet, tearing, froze everyone in place. Colton didn't freeze. "Back!" he shouted, grabbing a pipe wrench from a nearby crate. The thing, because it wasn't a man anymore, turned toward him. Blood dripped from its mouth as it charged. Colton stepped in and swung. The wrench connected with a crack that echoed across the site. The body dropped. Still. For half a second, everything went silent. Then Briggs started screaming. The oil field didn't fall apart all at once. It unraveled. Briggs convulsed on the ground, hands clawing at his own neck, choking on blood that bubbled from the wound. Two men tried to hold him down. "Call someone," one shouted. "I'm trying," another yelled, shaking a useless phone. Colton backed away slowly, eyes locked on Briggs. Something wasn't right. The wound was catastrophic. There was no way. Briggs stopped screaming. His body went still. "He's gone," someone said. Relief flickered. Then Briggs's eyes snapped open, clouded, wrong. He lunged. The second attack came faster, more violent. Screams echoed as panic finally took hold. Workers scattered, some running for trucks, others grabbing tools like weapons. Colton moved with purpose. "Keys," he muttered, patting his pocket. Still there, he turned and sprinted for his truck. Behind him, the oil field descended into chaos. The road out of Midland was already starting to clog. Colton pushed the truck hard, engine roaring as he veered off main roads and onto dirt paths only locals and rig workers knew. The radio spat fragments of panic. Military advisories, emergency broadcasts, voices talking over each other. "Infection! Do not engage! Quarantine has failed!" Then static. He slammed the radio off. "Think," he said aloud. "Where do you go when the world ends?" For Colton, the answer came immediately. Santa Fe. The cabin. A year ago, it had been an impulse buy, a retreat from long shifts and longer nights, a place to sit in silence, away from machines and men. But he'd prepared it like a bunker: food, water, ammo. Enough for a year, maybe more. If he could get there. Odessa was burning. The skyline shimmered with heat and smoke, black plumes rising into the sky like storm clouds. The highway was a graveyard. Cars abandoned at every angle, doors hanging open, belongings scattered across asphalt. Bodies lay everywhere. Some didn't stay down. Colton slowed as he approached the edge of the chaos, scanning the road. "Come on, come on!" A gap, narrow but possible. He eased forward. That's when they moved. Figures emerged from between the cars, slow at first, then accelerating with terrifying speed. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, but purposeful. Hungry. Colton floored it. The truck slammed into the first one, the impact jarring his entire body. Another hit the side, clawing at the window, leaving streaks of blood. A third landed on the hood, its face pressed against the glass, teeth snapping inches from him. Colton swerved hard. The body flew off, disappearing beneath the wheels. "Stay down!" he shouted, as if they could hear him. The road narrowed ahead, a pileup blocking most of the lanes. No time, he jerked the wheel, veering off-road. The truck bounced violently over dirt and debris, suspension screaming in protest. Dust swallowed everything behind him. He didn't look back. By the time he crossed into New Mexico, the world felt empty. No radio, no traffic, just wind and distant smoke. He drove without headlights as night fell, relying on moonlight and instinct. The desert stretched endlessly, shadows shifting with every gust of wind. He stopped once, just long enough to siphon gas. That's when the voices came. "Hands where I can see 'em!" Colton froze. Slowly, he raised his hands. 3 men stepped out of the darkness, rifles trained on him. Not infected. Worse. Desperate. "Truck," one said. "Keys, now." Colton studied them. Calculated. "No." The man smiled thinly. "That's a mistake." The gunshot cracked. Colton moved. He hit the ground as the bullet tore past, rolling behind the SUV. His pistol was already in his hand. 2 shots, controlled. The first man dropped instantly. The others scattered, returning fire. Bullets sparked against metal, ricocheting into the night. Colton moved low, circling using shadows. One of them rushed him. Big mistake. Colton surged forward, slamming into him, wrenching the rifle free. The knife came next, quick, brutal. The last man ran. Colton didn't chase. He stood there, breathing hard, heart pounding in his ears. The world had changed, and it wasn't just the dead he had to worry about. Dawn broke over the mountains. Santa Fe, close now. The air cooled, carrying the scent of pine. The road twisted upward, cutting through dense forest and rocky slopes. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful. Then he saw them, dozens, wandering the roadside, waiting. Colton tightened his grip on the wheel. No turning back. He accelerated. By the time Colton Clay killed the engine, The silence in the mountains felt more dangerous than the screaming in Midland. The truck ticked as it cooled, metal settling under the noon sun. Pine branches swayed overhead. Somewhere down in the valley, wind moved through the trees with a low, steady hush, like the mountain was whispering to itself. The cabin stood ahead of him at the end of a narrow dirt cut, weathered cedar walls the color of old bone, a green metal roof half hidden beneath tall ponderosas, the porch shaded and still. Home, if the world still allowed such a word. He didn't trust it. Colton sat for 3 more seconds with the shotgun across his lap, listening. No movement inside, no broken glass, no footprints that he could see from here, though the ground around the cabin was a mess of pine needles and old gravel. His hands were blistered from the wheel, his shoulders locked tight from 2 days of driving and fighting and not sleeping. He ignored all of it. He stepped out carefully and the mountain air hit him at once. Cold for spring, clean in a way the oil fields never were. Not dust and diesel, not hot iron and grease. This smelled like sap, stone, dry earth, distant snow. It should have calmed him. Instead, it sharpened everything. He checked the tree line first. Dark trunks, slashes of sunlight, long shadows, 100 places for something to watch from. Then the porch, then the windows. The glass was intact, curtains drawn just where he had left them. His boots creaked on the steps as he climbed. Each board felt too loud. He put a hand on the door and paused. Then he pushed it open with a shotgun barrel. The cabin greeted him with cold stillness and the faint smell of wood smoke trapped in old timber. Table, chairs, cast iron stove, shelves along the wall, the rug by the door. No signs of struggle, no blood, no overturned furniture. The place was untouched. Colton moved room by room anyway, clearing every corner with the shotgun up and his heart pounding hard enough to feel in his teeth. Kitchen, small bathroom, rear storage room, loft above the main room, the understair compartment. Nothing living, nothing dead, only supplies. He opened the pantry door and let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Shelves from floor to ceiling. Canned beans, peaches, soup, chili, coffee, jerky, rice, flour, oats, salt, powdered milk, water stacked in blue containers, medical kits, batteries, boxes of shells and rifle cartridges sealed in plastic, propane, 2 fuel cans, hand tools, blankets, generator parts, a crank radio, his old hunting pack. Everything lined up exactly how he had left it months ago, back when preparing had felt halfway like a joke. Now it looked like prophecy. Colton set the shotgun on the table and leaned both hands against the pantry shelf. His body wanted to shake now that it had a chance. He forced it still. 1 year, he said again, softer this time, a year if he rationed. Maybe more if he hunted well. Maybe less if the generator failed, if the water system froze, if the dead came, if people came, if he got sick, if he made one bad mistake. He closed the pantry and went back outside. The mountain spread out below the cabin in rolling layers of green and blue. To the west, jagged ridgelines cut the sky. To the east, the land descended through forest into dry hills and broken mesas. Far off, almost hidden in the haze, he could see a thin smear of smoke rising from somewhere near Santa Fe proper. The city was still burning. He stood there with one hand on the porch post and watched it until his jaw tightened. Midland came back to him in sharp pieces, Briggs choking on blood. The first body on the wrench. The robber in the desert reaching for the rifle with surprise still on his face, as if he couldn't believe another man would kill him for staying alive. Colton looked down at his hands. Oil still lived in the cracks of his skin beneath the new blood. No use standing there. He started working. The first rule of survival, as far as Colton was concerned, was simple. Comfort gets you killed. He moved through the afternoon like a machine, turning the cabin from a stocked retreat into a defensible position. He parked the truck behind a stand of trees off the main approach so it wouldn't be visible from below. He dragged cut logs to narrow the driveway. He checked the rain catchment and hand pump. Both worked. He filled every container in the cabin anyway. He carried ammunition to firing points by the windows. He set the hunting rifle in the loft overlooking the front approach, the shotgun downstairs by the door, the pistol on his hip. Then he walked the perimeter. The cabin sat on a shelf of ground just below a rocky rise, with a slope dropping away on the far side into thick forest. Good visibility in front. Worse behind. There was an old game trail winding through the trees to the north and a dry wash cutting down the south side toward the road. 2 blind spots. 2 places for trouble. He found his roll of orange trail tape in the shed and tied short strips at eye level through the trees in arcs only he'd notice. Markers for distance, 20 yards, 40, 60. He strung fishing line with tin cans along the wash and anchored a few crude noise traps near the trail. Primitive, but primitive still worked. By sunset, his shirt clung to him with sweat despite the cold air. His stomach gnawed at him. He opened a can of chili, ate half of it cold, and drank standing up at the sink. The cabin darkened around him. Gold light gave way to blue. He did not light the lamps. Instead, he sat on the porch in the dark with a shotgun across his knees and watched the mountains fade. That was when he heard the first distant scream. It came from far below and rolled upward through the trees. High, ragged, almost human except for the way it didn't seem to contain fear or pain or thought. Just hunger given sound. Another answered it. Then a third. Colton didn't move. He only listened, counting direction, estimating distance. A cluster somewhere east, maybe near the road. Not close enough to worry him. Yet. Night settled hard in the mountains. Stars came out in impossible numbers, cold and white over black ridges. In another life, it would have been beautiful. Now every star just seemed to make the dark between them deeper. Near midnight, the cans on the south wash rattled. Colton was on his feet before the sound finished, shotgun in hand, body already moving to the window beside the door. He crouched and peered through a slit in the curtain. Nothing. The cans moved once more. Soft, a twitch rather than a pull. Wind? Animal? He waited. A shape emerged between the trees below the wash, man-sized, bent, moving wrong. Then another. They climbed without caution, snagging the fishing line and dragging the cans into a clattering chorus. One wore what might once have been a park ranger's jacket. The other was little more than a torn flannel shirt over gray, open flesh. Both turned toward the noise as if confused by it, then resumed their climb. Colton counted 3 seconds, breathed once, opened the door just enough to step through. The first infected looked up at him from 15 yards away. Its jaw worked wetly. One arm hung broken at the elbow, but it came on fast anyway, scrambling over the slope with desperate speed. Colton fired. The shotgun blast lit the trees in white-orange for an instant. The first one flew backward, skull and bark and dirt exploding into darkness. The second lunged sideways as if startled by the sound, but didn't stop. Colton pumped, fired again. It dropped halfway up the slope and slid down into the brush. Silence rushed back in. Then, from farther down the mountain came answering cries. A lot of answering cries. Colton's face hardened. Damn! The shotgun blast had rung through every draw and ravine in the area. Whatever was roaming below had heard it. He ducked back inside, locked the door, and killed the brief flicker of a lantern he had instinctively reached for. Darkness swallowed the room again. He moved by memory up to the loft, grabbed the rifle, and lay prone behind the small front window. At first, there was nothing. Then shapes. They emerged below like shadows learning to stand. One on the road, two by the pines, another stumbling from the dry wash. Then more. Men and women. A teenager in a torn hoodie. An older man in a denim jacket. A woman in hiking clothes with half her scalp peeled back. A little cluster drawn uphill by the sound of gunfire, weaving through the trees until the dark itself seemed to be moving. Not a full horde. Not yet. Enough. Colton steadied the rifle against the sill and picked the closest target. The crosshairs settled at the bridge of its nose. He squeezed. The crack of the rifle was smaller than the shotgun, but no less sharp in the night. The body collapsed. Two others turned at the sound, then resumed climbing, faster now. He worked methodically. Fire, cycle, fire, another fell, then another. Each shot punched through mountain silence and brought more answering shrieks from below. The slope in front of the cabin became a shifting patchwork of trunks and bodies and pale, moving faces. One made it to the porch steps before he saw it, crawling rather than walking, dragging ruined legs behind it with spider-like determination. Colton dropped the rifle, snatched the shotgun, and fired down through the floorboards at the sound of its hands slapping wood below him. The blast blew splinters through the night, and whatever was under the porch stopped moving. For 10 minutes, the fight came in ugly pulses. Small groups, then singles, then another cluster drawn by noise and blood. He used the rifle when he had distance, and the shotgun when anything got near. Twice he had to lean from the loft window and fire nearly straight down. Shells littered the floorboards around him. Gun smoke thickened the air. His shoulder numbed from recoil. Then the mountain gave him something new to fear. Headlights. Low down through the trees, beyond the shambling dead. Two yellow beams bounced along the road below and cut off. Colton froze. The infected below turned toward where the vehicle had stopped. Several staggered that direction. Then came the brief murmur of voices. Human voices. Not loud, not panicked, organized. He sank lower behind the loft wall and peered through the window without showing his face. 3 figures moved uphill from the road with flashlights kept low. They weren't stumbling. They weren't wandering. They were advancing. One of them had a long gun. Another had something slung across his back. Their lights snapped off one by one as they reached the trees. Colton felt the shape of the night change. The dead were dangerous because they were simple. The living were dangerous because they adapted. The men below had heard shots, seen the cabin, maybe seen the truck tracks. In a world falling apart, a cabin with guns and supplies was a beacon. A few of the infected reached them first. A flashlight snapped on and a pistol barked twice. One body dropped. Another figure grappled at close range, cursing. The living man shoved the infected away and drove something, knife or hatchet, down into its head. Another shot echoed through the trees. "Cabin!" someone shouted. "There's somebody up there!" Colton rolled away from the window just as a bullet cracked through the glass and buried itself in the far wall. So that was that. No talking, no bluff. Straight to it. He crawled to the opposite side of the loft and moved to a second firing angle above the rear of the room. From here, he couldn't see the front steps, but he could watch the north trail and part of the porch through gaps in the walls. He heard boots below, moving fast around the front of the cabin, and then the scrape of hands on the outside wall. One of them was coming for the porch. Colton waited by the top of the loft ladder with a shotgun leveled at the dark below. He heard the porch boards creak. Then the door handle moved once, slowly, testing. A voice came through the wood. Calm, male. "Hey, we don't want trouble. Need food and ammo. Open up and maybe this goes easy." Colton said nothing. The man on the other side tried again. "You alone in there?" Still nothing. Then, from farther out, "Ray, movement left." A rifle cracked. A guttural scream answered. Another. The infected were still converging on the gunfire. The man at the door cursed. "Open up, damn it!" Instead, Colton stepped to the side and fired through the door where a man's chest would be standing. The blast tore the lock plate apart and blew whoever had been on the porch backward with a howl. Colton heard the body hit the boards outside and something metal clatter away. Gunfire erupted from the trees. Bullets punched through the wall, spraying splinters through the room. Colton dropped flat and crawled toward the kitchen, glass crunching beneath him. A round ripped through the loft railing inches above his head. Outside, the wounded man on the porch began screaming in earnest. The infected loved screaming. From the forest below came a rising chorus. Closer now, many throats together, branches snapped, feet thudded. The mountain itself seemed to stir. One of the raiders shouted, "We gotta move!" Another yelled back, "Not empty-handed!" Then the screaming man on the porch cut off in a choking gurgle. The noise outside changed from gunfight to slaughter in the span of a breath. Colton rose just enough to look through the kitchen window. Flashlight beams jerked wildly between trunks. Shapes collided. One living man fired point blank into an infected face, turned, and was dragged sideways into darkness by 3 more. Another ran for the road with a horde on his heels, firing blind over his shoulder until something caught him by the neck, and he vanished beneath a storm of bodies. The third reached the vehicle. Engine roared. Tires spun. The truck down below lurched, clipped a tree, then shot down the mountain road in a burst of gravel and vanished into the dark. The infected left behind milled in confusion beneath the cabin, snapping and moaning and climbing over bodies they could no longer decide were dead or dinner. Colton didn't waste the chance. He started shooting again. The battle became close and vicious, stripped of any illusion that this cabin was a refuge. This was a fort now, and the mountain had come to test it. Infected reached the porch. He blasted one through the window and showered the table in glass. Another forced an arm through the shattered lower pane, clawing at empty air until Colton put a pistol round through its eye. 2 stumbled together up the south slope, and he dropped them with the rifle. A woman in a blood-black dress made it all the way to the porch rail and hurled herself against it with enough force to break a spindle loose. He shot her in the mouth, and the recoil rocked him back into the wall. Minutes stretched, or hours. Time became shells, breath, targets. The dead came because noise called them. The living had come because need did. And Colton Clay held the line because there was nowhere else left to go. At some point, maybe 2 in the morning, the rush slowed. The forest still moved with distant shapes and stray cries, but the immediate slope in front of the cabin was littered with still bodies. Some were draped over rocks, some tangled in brush, some collapsed half on top of the porch steps. Gun smoke hung in the cold air. Blood darkened the ground in irregular slicks. Colton didn't trust stillness anymore, so he waited with the rifle sighted on the front approach until the sky began to pale. Dawn came thin and gray over the mountain, revealing what the night had hidden. The cabin looked like it had survived a war. Windows cracked, porch rails splintered, the front door nearly torn off its hinges. Dead infected lay across the clearing, some human enough in daylight to be upsetting all over again. A man in hiking boots face down beside a stump. A woman no older than 20 slumped against a pine. The raider he had blasted through the door lay twisted across the porch boards, one hand still reaching toward the broken lock, his chest a ruin of blackened blood and torn fabric. Something had eaten most of his face during the night. Colton stood in the doorway with a shotgun hanging low and stared at the scene until the cold bit through his clothes. He was alive. The cabin was standing. That was the victory. It didn't feel like one. He spent the morning cleaning. There was no room for disgust, no room for reflection either. Bodies drew scavengers and disease and more of the dead, if the dead could still smell. He pulled a bandana over his mouth, found his work gloves, and got to it. The infected on the slope he dragged with a rope and a hooked pole to a burn pile well downwind from the cabin. The raider on the porch he searched first. Knife, 6 spare pistol rounds, cheap lighter, half a protein bar. No ID, no photos. Nothing to say who he had been before the end except a tattoo on one wrist. A crude black horseshoe. Colton almost left the body there. Then he dragged that one too. By noon, smoke rolled through the trees from the pit below. It stank like rotten meat and melted hair. He kept feeding it until there was nothing left to attract anything. When he came back uphill, he found the broken porch spindle in the dirt and set it aside. He looked over the door. Repairable. Windows too, if he boarded them partially and kept narrow firing slits. He could do all that. He'd been solving problems with his hands his whole life. Steel cracked, pumps failed, lines blew out, men got stupid, weather turned, equipment broke. You fixed what you could and worked around what you couldn't. So he fixed. He replaced the lock with a heavier bar from the shed. He nailed planks across the lower half of the front windows. He reinforced the porch steps so nothing could crawl underneath again. He moved one bookshelf to create cover inside the main room. He shifted supply crates into a back corner that bullets from the front wouldn't easily reach. Only after all of that did he sit down. The sun was past its peak. His muscles throbbed. His hands were scraped raw in new places. He poured black coffee from a camp pot and drank it lukewarm at the table while the cabin smelled of cut wood, ash, and spent powder. On the table in front of him, he laid out what the night had cost. 12 shotgun shells left in the first box, 37 rifle rounds, 2 pistol magazines full, 1 half full, 1 cracked window, 1 ruined door, 1 porch rail, unknown number of dead below the cabin he hadn't seen. At least 3 armed men now aware this place existed, even if only one escaped. That last part mattered most. The dead were a pressure. The living were a threat. Colton stared at the steam rising from the coffee and thought of the truck that had gotten away. A man had driven off before dawn. That man knew there was a cabin in the mountains with supplies, and one occupant willing to kill to keep them. He would remember. Maybe he'd stay away. Maybe he'd bring others. In the old world, a lot of men looked at a locked door and moved on. In a starving world, some looked at a locked door and saw treasure. A noise interrupted the thought. Not outside, inside. A faint crackle from the back shelf. Colton was moving before he even knew why, pistol in hand, coffee sloshing across the table. The sound came again, a little burst of static from the crank radio he'd left among the supplies. He reached it in 3 strides and stared. For a second, he thought he'd imagined it. Then the speaker hissed. Static swelled, broke, and through it came a voice, weak, faded, human. Any survivors receiving this? Colton grabbed the radio, turning the dial with shaking fingers. Repeat, any survivors receiving this message, shelter advisories remain in effect. Avoid population centers. Do not approach infected individuals. Infection is transmitted through bites and blood exposure. Static swallowed part of the message. Then, National Guard evacuation corridor failed west of Albuquerque. Repeat, failed. Civilian movement toward high ground, not advised unless self-sufficient. The signal dipped again, then returned with another voice, more frantic. Probably from some other station bleeding through. Santa Fe Medical Center has been overrun. Do not come here. I repeat, do not come here. A scream cut the broadcast. Then static. Colton stood motionless in the center of the cabin, the radio cradled in both hands. So that was official enough. Cities gone, corridors failed, hospitals overrun. High ground only useful if you could hold it. He looked around the battered cabin and felt a grim, humorless smile tug once at the corner of his mouth. Self-sufficient, he said to the empty room. The mountain wind moved outside. Then, from somewhere down the road below, so faint he almost missed it, came the echo of an engine. Not close, but out there. Colton set the radio down, picked up the rifle, and stepped onto the porch. Smoke from the burn pit drifted across the trees like a warning signal. Far beyond it, through gaps in the forest, he could just make out the lower road curving around the mountain. Nothing visible now, only silence, and the knowledge that silence meant very little anymore. He raised the rifle to his shoulder and scanned the pines. The first night had not broken him. It had introduced him to the rules. The mountains had their dead. The roads had their wolves. Santa Fe was gone, or close enough to it. And somewhere out there, a man in a fleeing truck knew this cabin existed. Colton Clay settled his cheek against the stock and kept watch over the valley. The year had only just begun. The mountains didn't wait for him to be ready. They never had. Colton Clay learned that in the first week after the siege, when the nights grew sharper, the wind came down the ridges like a blade, and frost started claiming the ground before sunset. Survival wasn't just about the dead or the living anymore. It was about time, and winter was coming fast. The first snow came early, a thin dusting at dawn, barely enough to cover the dirt, but enough to change everything. Tracks, movement, sound. The entire mountain shifted into something quieter and more dangerous. Colton stood on the porch, coffee steaming in his hand, watching his breath drift into the cold air. White powder clung to the bodies he'd missed below the slope. He'd have to deal with those later. Right now, he watched the road. Every morning, same routine, same stillness, same waiting. But now there were tracks, not infected, tires, old, half-filled with snow, but unmistakable. Someone had been back. He followed them before noon. Colton didn't take the truck. Too loud, too visible. Instead, he moved on foot with his rifle, pack, and enough supplies for a day. The cold bit through his jacket as he worked his way down the slope, boots crunching softly over frost and ice. The tracks cut along the lower road, then veered off toward a narrow trail he hadn't used before. That was enough. He slowed, every step deliberate. The forest felt different here. Tighter, quieter, like it was holding something in. Then he saw the first body, face down in the snow, frozen, not infected, shot. Colton crouched beside it, brushing snow from the coat. Civilian, mid-30s maybe. No supplies left on him. Whoever killed him had taken everything useful. Raiders. The same group? Maybe. He kept moving. The trail opened into a clearing about a quarter mile ahead. Colton dropped low immediately, sliding behind a fallen log as voices carried through the trees. Told you we should have hit it that night. You saw what happened, man. Those things came out of nowhere. A third voice, calmer, colder. Doesn't matter. We know it's there now. Colton eased forward just enough to see. 4 men, armed. One stood apart from the others. Taller, heavier coat, rifle slung but ready. He wasn't pacing, wasn't nervous. He was thinking. That made him the problem. "Guy's alone," one of the others said. "Has to be." "Doesn't mean he's weak," the leader replied. Colton felt a slow tightening in his chest. They were talking about him. "We come back with more," another said. "Hit it fast, take everything." The leader nodded slightly. "Not yet. We watch first, starve him out if we have to." Colton's grip on the rifle tightened. Starve him out. So that was the plan. Smart, dangerous, and not something he could allow. The first shot dropped the man on the left. Clean. Silent except for the crack of the rifle echoing through the trees. Chaos followed instantly. "Contact!" The remaining 3 scattered, diving for cover behind trees and rocks. One fired blindly into the forest. Another dragged the wounded man, still alive, barely, behind a stump. The leader didn't panic. He moved, fast, controlled, rifle up, scanning. Colton shifted position immediately, rolling away from his last spot. A bullet snapped into the log he'd been behind seconds before. Too close. He circled right, keeping low, using the terrain. Snow crunched underfoot no matter how careful he was. No stealth now, just angles and timing. Another shot. His this time. The second raider dropped mid-step. 2 left. "Spread," the leader barked. "Good call." They split. Colton cursed under his breath. Now it got harder. The storm lasted 3 days. By the second, the world outside the cabin had vanished. Snow swallowed the trees, buried the road, erased tracks and bodies and blood alike. Wind howled down the mountain in long, relentless waves, rattling the reinforced walls and driving powder through every crack it could find. The sky stayed a solid, blinding gray. No sun, no stars, just a ceiling pressing down on everything. Colton didn't waste it. Storms like this were dangerous, but they were also cover. He used the time to prepare. The map lay flat on the table, weighed down at the corners with ammunition boxes. It was crude but useful. Hand-drawn lines marking roads, trails, elevation changes. Whoever made it knew the area well. And they'd circled something. A wide, rough ring just southwest of Santa Fe. Their base. Colton studied it between tasks, memorizing every turn, every landmark. He traced possible routes with a calloused finger. Main road, too exposed. Side trails, slower but safer. Ridge approach, high ground but open. He'd need to move fast, hit hard, get out before the dead or the rest of the raiders could react. This wasn't a rescue mission, it was a warning. He packed carefully. Rifle cleaned and oiled. Shotgun with what shells he could spare. Pistol fully loaded. 3 extra magazines, knife, hatchet, rations for 2 days, water, bandages, the radio, the map. He hesitated at the last item, then added one more thing. A small, weathered photograph tucked into a book on the shelf. Him and his brother, taken years ago on a hunting trip in these same mountains. Both younger, both smiling. A different world. Colton slipped it into his jacket. Then he waited. On the 4th morning, the storm broke. The sky cleared to a hard, pale blue. Snow glittered under sunlight like shattered glass. The mountain was silent again, but it was a different silence now. Heavier, reset. Colton stepped onto the porch, breath fogging the air, and scanned the valley. No movement. Good. He turned back inside, shouldered his pack, and headed out. Traveling after snowfall was a gamble. Everything was visible, including him. Colton moved along the tree line, keeping to shadows where he could, following the rough direction of the map while avoiding open ground. His boots crunched with every step, each sound loud in the frozen stillness. The world felt abandoned. Cabins along the lower slope stood empty, doors open, windows shattered, snow drifting inside. One had blood smeared across the porch. Another had claw marks gouged deep into the wood. He didn't stop, didn't search. Supplies could wait. Time couldn't. By midday, the mountains began to thin. Pine gave way to scrub, snow to patchy ice and dirt. The air grew drier, the land more exposed, and then smoke. Not the thin, wandering plumes he'd seen before. This was thicker, darker, constant. Colton dropped low behind a ridge and studied the valley below. Santa Fe's outskirts, or what was left of them. The town had been gutted. Buildings stood blackened and hollow. Cars littered the roads in tangled, rusting lines. Fires still burned in places, fed by something deep and slow. The streets were empty at first glance. They weren't. They moved. Dozens of infected wandered between structures, drifting aimlessly or clustering in small groups. Some stood completely still, as if waiting. Others jerked and staggered through debris, drawn by sounds Colton couldn't hear. A city of the dead, and somewhere in it, the living. Colton circled wide. He avoided the main roads, cutting through back lots and dry arroyos, using terrain to stay hidden. The map guided him toward the marked location, a cluster of old industrial buildings near the edge of town. Half a mile out, he slowed, then stopped. Voices. He dropped behind a collapsed wall and peered through a gap. The base. It wasn't subtle. Barricades made of cars and scrap metal formed a rough perimeter around a warehouse complex. Fires burned in barrels. Armed men patrolled the outer edges, rifles slung or ready. Makeshift towers, just stacked pallets and scaffolding, gave them height over the surrounding area. Colton counted at least 12, probably more inside. And movement near the center, people without weapons, prisoners or workers, either way not free. His jaw tightened. A shout broke the air. 2 raiders dragged a man into the open yard. The man struggled weakly, hands bound, face bruised. "Please," he rasped, "I gave you everything." One of the raiders hit him hard enough to drop him. Not enough. The others watched. No one intervened. The leader wasn't there, but his system was. Order through fear. Colton felt something cold settle into place inside him. This wasn't just survival. This was control, and it wasn't going to stop on its own. He pulled back from the wall and moved to higher ground. He needed angles, options, time. From a rooftop across the street, he found what he needed. A clear view of the yard, the barricade, the patrol routes, and one weak point, the eastern side, less guarded, closer to the dead. Risky, perfect. Colton waited until dusk. The infected grew more active as light faded, drawn by movement, sound, instinct. Shadows stretched long across the ruined streets. He used that. A thrown rock here, a broken window there, noise, small at first, then more. The dead began to shift, drift, toward the eastern barricade. The raiders noticed. "Hey, hey, watch that side." Flashlights snapped on, guns raised, too late. The first infected hit the outer edge of the barricade, clawing and snarling. Then more followed, drawn by the commotion. The perimeter buckled. "Shoot them!" Gunfire erupted. That was Colton's cue. He moved fast, across the rooftop, down the fire escape, through a broken alley, straight toward the opposite side of the compound. While the raiders focused on the incoming dead, Colton slipped through a gap in the western barricade. Quiet, low, controlled. Inside, the yard was chaos, gunfire, shouting, screaming. The infected pressed against one side, while raiders scrambled to hold the line. Colton moved through shadows, avoiding the center, heading straight for the interior building. He found the prisoners in a side room, 5 of them, weak, frightened, alive. One looked up as he entered, eyes wide. "Who?" "Quiet," Colton said. He cut their bindings quickly. "You want out?" he asked. They nodded. "Then follow me. Stay close, no noise." Getting out was harder. The compound was unraveling, but not fast enough. A raider rounded the corner. Colton shot him before he could speak. The sound echoed. Too loud. "Back there!" someone shouted. So much for quiet. "Move!" Colton snapped. They ran. The escape turned into a sprint through fire and blood. Infected breached part of the barricade, spilling into the yard. Raiders fought them off, but their formation was breaking. Shots went wild. Screams filled the air. Colton led the group through the same gap he'd entered, shoving debris aside as they pushed through. One of the prisoners stumbled. An infected lunged. Colton turned and fired point blank, dropping it inches away. "Keep moving." They didn't stop. They reached the outer street just as full chaos consumed the compound. Behind them, the base was collapsing, overrun by the dead and torn apart by its own panic. But Colton didn't slow. Not until they were well clear. They took shelter in a half-collapsed building several blocks away. Dark, cold, safe, for now. The group huddled together, breathing hard. One of them, a woman in her 30s, looked at Colton. "You came back," she said. Colton shook his head slightly. "Wasn't here before." She frowned. "Then why?" Colton glanced toward the distant sounds of gunfire and screams, then back at them. "Because they were coming for me anyway." Silence settled. Heavy, understanding. Outside, the valley of smoke burned. The dead roamed the streets. The raiders, what was left of them, fought to survive. And Colton Clay had just changed the balance. Not by saving the world, not by stopping the outbreak, but by choosing a side. He checked his rifle, looked at the group. Then, toward the mountains. "Rest for an hour," he said. "Then we move." "Where?" someone asked. Colton's expression didn't change. "Up." They didn't make it back to the mountains in one piece. Colton knew they wouldn't. 5 survivors was already too many. Too loud, too slow, too unpredictable. But leaving them behind wasn't an option he could live with. Not after what he'd seen in that compound. Not after what he'd already done to stay alive. So he moved them fast. They left the ruins of Santa Fe under a sky the color of ash. Smoke still crawled from the city behind them, rising in thick columns that smeared across the horizon. The dead filled the streets in drifting clusters, drawn by the collapse of the raider base. Gunfire had faded, but the damage was done. Noise had spread like ripples in water. Everything was shifting. Everything was moving. And they were right in the middle of it. "Stay close," Colton said, low and firm. "No talking unless you have to." They nodded. The group followed. They moved through back paths and broken terrain, avoiding open streets. Colton led, scanning constantly, adjusting their route on instinct more than memory now. The map helped, but the world had changed since it was drawn. Roads blocked, buildings collapsed, new threats everywhere. Behind them, one of the survivors, a younger guy, maybe early 20s, stumbled. "Keep up," Colton said without turning. "I'm trying," the kid muttered. Colton stopped, turned, walked back 2 steps. "You don't try," he said, voice calm but hard. "You do, or you die. Understand?" The kid swallowed, nodded. They kept moving. The first real hit came just past the dry arroyo. A single infected stumbled out from behind a wrecked car. Then 2 more, then 10, drawn by something. Maybe them, maybe the distant chaos. Didn't matter. Back, Colton ordered. Too late, the horde surged. Run! They broke into a sprint, boots pounding against cracked pavement and dirt. The infected followed, faster than they should have been, arms reaching, jaws snapping. One of the survivors screamed as something grabbed at her pack. Colton turned mid-stride and fired. 1 shot, clean. The infected dropped, but more filled the gap instantly. Move! They cut left into a narrow alley, then through a collapsed fence into open scrub. The terrain slowed the dead slightly, but not enough. Colton scanned ahead. Options. There. A low ridge with scattered rocks. Up there! He shouted. They climbed hard, slipping on loose dirt and stone. One by one, they scrambled over the ridge. Colton turned at the top, raised the rifle, and started firing. The ridge became a temporary line. The infected climbed toward them in a broken wave, stumbling, clawing, relentless. Colton dropped them as they came. 1 shot, 1 body, again. Beside him, one of the survivors, an older man, picked up a fallen handgun and joined in, hands shaking but determined. They held. Barely. Then, the horde faltered, not stopping, but slowing. Something behind them pulled their attention. A new sound, deeper, louder, engines. Colton's blood ran cold. He didn't need to look. He knew. Raiders. Dust rose in the distance as 2 trucks tore across the open ground, engines roaring, cutting straight toward the ridge. They'd regrouped, tracked him, and now they were finishing it. Down! Colton barked. Gunfire erupted from the vehicles, bullets kicking up dirt and rock around them. The infected turned toward the noise instantly. Perfect. The truck slammed into the edges of the horde, plowing through bodies, scattering them, drawing the rest like magnets. Raiders fired wildly from the beds, shouting, laughing, until the dead overwhelmed the first vehicle. It flipped. Hard. Metal screamed. Bodies swarmed. The second truck veered, trying to escape, but it was too late. They'd driven straight into a feeding frenzy. Colton didn't wait. Move, he said. They ran. Again. The rest of the journey blurred into exhaustion and instinct. Day faded into night. The temperature dropped hard. Snow began to fall again, light at first, then heavier. The mountains loomed ahead like a wall. Home. Almost. They reached the cabin at dawn. Barely. The survivors collapsed inside, too tired to speak. One immediately broke down, silent tears cutting through dirt and blood. Another just sat against the wall, staring at nothing. Colton locked the door behind them, checked the windows, set the rifle down, then leaned against the wall for just a second, just one. He allowed himself that. Then he pushed off and got to work. Listen, he said, voice steady. This place only works if we make it work. Everyone pulls their weight, no exceptions. They looked at him, tired, but listening. Good. You, he pointed to the older man, with me. We reinforce the perimeter. To the rest of you, water, food, rest. Then you help. No arguments, no hesitation. They understood. For a while, it worked. Days passed, then weeks. They settled into a rhythm. Watch rotations, supply checks, firewood runs, small hunts. The cabin became something new, not just survival, a system, fragile, but real. Then winter hit, hard. Snow buried the mountain. Temperatures dropped below anything comfortable, then kept falling. The world outside shrank to white and gray and silence. Even the dead moved less, frozen or slowed to near stillness, but not gone, never gone. Inside tensions grew. 5 survivors meant 5 different fears, 5 different breaking points. Food became numbers, water became rationed, space became tight. One night the younger man snapped. "We can't stay here," he said. "We're just waiting to die." Colton didn't raise his voice. "Then leave." Silence. The kid didn't move, didn't argue. He just sat back down, and that was the end of it. The attack came in late winter, not a horde, not chaos, something worse, organized. Colton saw them first, figures moving through the trees, careful, armed, more than before, the last of the raiders. And they'd learned. "Positions," Colton said quietly. The cabin came alive, weapons ready, lights out. Silence. They waited. The first shot shattered a window. Then everything exploded. Gunfire tore through the walls. Raiders advanced from multiple sides, using trees for cover, pushing closer with each volley. Colton returned fire from the loft, dropping one, then another. But they kept coming. Then, a second sound. Familiar, horrifying. The dead. The raiders had brought them, drawn them in, used them. The forest erupted with movement as infected surged toward the noise, toward the cabin, toward everything. The fight became madness. Bullets, screams, shattering wood, clawing hands. One raider made it inside. Colton met him at the base of the ladder. The fight was brutal, close, knife against rifle, fists, blood. Colton ended it with a single desperate strike, but there was no time to breathe. The walls were failing, the line was breaking. "Back!" he shouted. "Rear exit!" They fell back through the cabin, grabbing what they could, abandoning the rest. The door burst open behind them as infected poured inside. The cabin, his cabin, was lost. They ran into the storm, into the trees, into the unknown. Hours later, as night fell, they stopped, exhausted, freezing, alive, barely. Colton stood at the edge of a ridge looking back. Far in the distance, a faint glow marked where the cabin had been, burning, gone. One of the survivors stepped beside him. "What now?" Colton didn't answer right away. He stared out at the endless mountains, the dead below, the cold above, the long road ahead. Then he spoke. "We keep moving." He checked his rifle, turned away from the fire, and led them into the dark.